Hi, and welcome to my channel, Influence Colorist. Today's video is influenced by my saturation filter on my photo editing app. I don't know about you, but sometimes I spend more time on my editing than I do actually taking the picture. But for an example, I'm going to show you just a unicorn picture that I got off the web. I went into my photo editor and I'm into the saturation. And if you can see, if I go way to the right, it's going to increase that saturation, bright intense colors. And then I'm going to go to the left side and it's going to fade out those colors, leaving more of a grayscale. Both are beautiful in their own way, and I thought this concept would be fun to play with in a coloring book. I'm going to be coloring in the Worlds Within Worlds book by Kerby Rosanes. The unicorns in a cage with crystals is a page I can visualize as being very bright and colorful. But the surrounding foliage I can see as less intense and more muted. I'm hoping this will create a distinct contrast, highlighting the unicorns and the crystals, but also creating a vignette-looking border around the edges. I'm not very good at color and chat, so I'm going to speed up the video in parts and I'll talk you through in some other parts. I hope you enjoy, and I'll discuss my final thoughts at the end. Alright, I'm going to be using Prismacolor pencils, and I'll list all my supplies and all the colors down below in the description box. I'm starting with the crystals first, and everything I'm doing in the cage is going to have really bright, intense color. I want the crystals to have color variations, but there will be more intense contrast between those colors. Not necessarily going for a realistic look, if that makes sense. The trick with faucets on crystals are fading your colors in opposite directions from each other. Meaning on one side, I will start dark on the top and fade to light. And then the next faucet right next to it, I will start dark on the bottom and fade up. And continue that around the crystal, blending in those colors with whatever blending tool you're using. For these crystals, I'm using a dark green and a medium to light green as my mid-tone, and a fluorescent yellow for my highlight and blending tool. The crystals on the outer edge, I did dark going to light. And then the mid section that I'm doing right now, I started with my mid-tone green first, and then my highlight, and then I went through and added a little bit of the darker green. I think this just gives the midsection crystals a lighter appearance, and then the outer edge. So that way it kind of helps with the depth. So it's brighter up there at the front of the cage, and as it's curving around, it's going darker. These upper crystals are going to be blue dominant, with some other bright colors shining through. Since they're in the middle of the cage, I'm starting with my mid-tone blue first. Same technique of fading in opposite directions as the green ones I did. Then I'll add a darker blue along the edge lines. And then to add a little bit of pop of color and also a little bit more brighter, intense light reflection, I'm going to be using that fluorescent yellow and just blending it in. It turns a slight shade of green by adding that yellow color. I'm going to go through after I get some of these other crystals done, and I'll add a little bit more pops of color inside those. All right, now I'm going to take my hot pink color and I'm just going to add a little bit of this pink just coming through. I don't press real hard on it. I just want to have like a little bit of pink showing through on some of those faucets. So the rainbow is going to be probably the biggest area where you see the change from a really bright, intense color to a more softer, muted tone. So each color I do, I'm going to start really heavy pressure inside the cage so we get that nice, intense color. And then as I go over the top arch of the rainbow heading down towards the plants, I'm really going to lighten up the pressure. So I'll do that for each of the colors. My unicorns are going to be mostly white. I'm going to shade with some lighter blues, some more lavender shades for each one. And the tails and manes are going to be mostly yellow with little pops of color, some oranges and pinks inside. So for my cage, I'm just using some shades of yellow, this more brighter yellow for majority of it. And then I'll follow up with a kind of darker, more goldeny yellow for the outside edges. Anytime a bar, like a horizontal and a vertical bar meet, I'll add some shadow around there. And now I'm taking a brown just to add a little bit more contrast for my shadow areas. I'm going to have a pink background, and I'm just kind of doing a really light blush shade of pink now. Later on I'll go back and I'll add my more brighter intense colors, but this just gives me a nice base coat to work with. So this is where it gets interesting, and I apologize up front for cutting off the video at the top. But basically, I'm wanting the colors to start fading as it's getting towards the edges. My plants closest to the cage will have more green shades, but more muted tones. And same with the pots, just using some terracotta shades. And then the ones closest to the edge will just be in grayscale. I'm using about 6 different grays, 3 cooler in light, medium, and dark, and then 3 warmer grays in light, medium, and dark. I'll also be adding some black where the darkest shadows are. This will help with the contrast. I tried to keep the cooler shades of gray for the plants and then the warmer grays for the terracotta pots. As we get towards the bottom, when there's a lot of foliage, then I try to just kind of go back and forth between this particular plant is going to be warm, and then the next plant, maybe behind it or in front of it, will be cooler. That way there's just more distinction between the two shapes. For the ground, I started with a really dark shade of brown, and then I went over it with my darkest warm gray. And then I also just added a little bit of distressing to the bottom of the cage here. Kind of wanted it to look a little dirty. All right, fast forward through all that ground foliage. I'm going to be doing the little fairies now. So the bodies are just going to be a dark gray to black, a little bit of like a hunter green and some other shades of green in there, but mostly dark just so they can look silhouetted against the light. And then the wings will have just a little pop of some blues and pinks. Okay, so now I'm going to take my hot pink and I'm just going to go over that base coat of light pink that I did. That way it helps it lay down a little bit easier, not too much pressure here that I'm using. And I'm just going to continue all the way inside the cage. It's going to come out of the cage just a little bit. So I'm still wanting it to be a little bit darker, a little bit more contrast around some of these objects. So I'm just going to take a magenta color and kind of go around these objects here. And then just take that blush pink color and blend it all out. So even along the edges, I'm gonna just go a little bit heavier along the edge of the cage and then work my way out to the edge, just lighting up my pressure. And then I'm gonna take this really light, cool gray, and I'm just gonna kind of blend those two shades together. So the pink and that gray are gonna meet, so I'm trying to blend it out smoothly. All right, now I'm going to take my white Posca pen. I'm going to add some more bright highlights in those facets of the crystals. And then there's also some little polka dots. Not sure if they're like little air bubbles or maybe some glitter coming out. But I'm going to add a few more around the rainbow and around some of the unicorns. Okay, here is my completed page. I actually really enjoy the look of the contrast between the bright saturated colors of the unicorn cage and then the more muted tones around the outside of the cage. And it was actually really fun to do the grayscale. Not sure I'd want to do it on a full page, but this was the perfect amount.